In today's video, we would talk more about the legal and ethical compliance. The main topics we would cover in this video are breaches of legal compliance, ethical non-compliance, techniques for monitoring the compliance, cost of non-compliance, and the types of specialist legal advice. So let's continue. First of all, non-compliance is what? It is a breach that would occur when there is a failure to comply with a legislative requirement, code of conduct, standards, rules of regulatory body, or any organizational internal policy and procedures. When talking about the non-compliance, the first one we have here is the legal non-compliance. This happens when there is a failure to comply with the legislative and regulatory requirement. In simple words, we can say it is breaking the law. For example, in Australia, if the employee or the employer organization is engaged in giving, receiving, or soliciting bribes, it is a breach of the Fair Work Act 2009. The Fair Work Ombudsman would consider this breach as a criminal offence and will refer the issue to the Australian Federal Police. Another example would be a client rental application being refused by the real estate agent just because of their skin color or their race. This would be a breach of Racial Discrimination Act 1975, which makes it unlawful to discriminate against a person because of his or their color, their race, their national origin, their ethnic origin, or their immigrant status. So this is an example of legal non-compliance where the law or the act is not being followed and there is a breach of legislative requirement. The next one is about ethical non-compliance. Now this one is a little bit more difficult to detect than the legal compliance. Ethics are what? Ethics are the moral principles that governs or regulate the human behavior. Our morals help us examine what is right, what is wrong, what is just, and what's unjust. When these moral principles and values are not being followed or not being upheld, and there is a violation of the established standards and principles in a particular field, that's when the ethical non-compliance happens. Now I'll give you an example. Let's say you made an error at a work and you messed up some work for the other team members as well. Now instead of owning up to your mistake and trying to fix that mistake, you're now putting that on another team member and blaming them for this error. This would be an unethical practice resulting in non-compliance of the organizational code of conduct policy. So when moral principles and values are not being upheld and there is a violation of the established standards, that's when the ethical non-compliance happens. And it can include all these things. For example, mishandling of funds, mishandling of documentation, a fraudulent billing, or conflict of interest. Now when these kind of non-compliance happen, this can cost an organization a lot, which is why we need to monitor compliance on a regular basis. There are many ways through which compliance can be monitored, but in this video I will talk about the 3 key monitoring strategies, which are: the first one or the first method to monitor compliance is through delegation, an appointment of a staff member for observing the client's areas closely in the organization. Now what happens, this person should also be responsible to make other team members aware about any sort of changes happening in the acts, legislative requirements, standards, rules, and the policies, and is also responsible to communicate these to the staff members. Second way, or the next way, is through regular internal audits. An annual report should be produced as a result of this audit on all compliance codes and areas. These audits from time to time can bring back the attention on an area which requires further improvement or the ones which are non-compliant. Now, internal monitoring helps the organization to rectify the approach in time. The third important technique is to establish a compliance risk assessment program. Now, what will happen in this program? This program will actually evaluate the compliance training needs of the organization, gather the resources for training materials, and implement the ongoing training to reinforce the compliance knowledge. These are the top 3 techniques of monitoring compliance in an organization. Now let's say we've been following that, but still there is some non-compliance. What happens next? Non-compliance can have severe consequences, including legal, financial, and reputational risks. The severity of these risks depend on the nature of the violation and the governing laws or regulations being violated. For example, non-compliance with data protection such as GDPR, HIPAA, or CCPA can result in hefty fines and legal actions. Additionally, failure to comply with the data protection laws can also lead to data breaches, which can result in legal actions from affected individuals and regulatory bodies. Lastly, there are some specialist legal advices available which can be obtained in order to avoid the non-compliance. You do not have to have a lawyer when you appear in front of the Commission. Many people choose to represent themselves. Some advice services and community legal centers offer free help. Thus, it's very important to understand the law society in your own state and your territory. I will also be sharing a link to this video which will take you some organizations in Australia, all over Australia and statewide also to help in relation to this matter. But that's the end of it. In this video, we've covered the top 2 types of breaches of legal and ethical non-compliance. We talked about the techniques of monitoring compliance and what cost the organization has to pay if there is non-compliance, and who is there out who can help us in this matter. Thank you.